for coming to this webinar on lobbying. If you send me comments or questions during this, Jason says it's happened in every webinar. I'll also feedback that it's a problem with the system, seems to be. But yeah, send me messages privately, and then I'll read out what things are, and then incorporate them into it. So yeah, any questions throughout, just give me a shout. We're probably to do this, but I know we've got Sophie from MMU and Lisa from Manchester Students' Union. I don't know where Jason and Jamie are from. Jason's from Southern SU. I don't know to what extent you guys have experience of lobbying before, or what you want to get out of this session, but if you message me, I'll try and incorporate it into the webinar. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Simon. I'm the campaigns officer at NUS. I've worked at NUS for about 1.5 years now. Before that, I worked at the environmental charity Friends of the Earth. And I also worked on the coalition against the Lobbying Act, which came in just before last general election, which is how I ended up at NUS actually. So in this webinar, we're going to look at identifying who to lobby and why, and how lobbying fits in with a broader campaign strategy in general. I'm also going to talk about identifying what's an effective lobbying meeting. Our current Cut the Costs campaign is an example. To start with, who is usually targeted at a decision maker, the person who holds the power in your campaign, who you're wanting to target, and who has the agency to make that change happen. But it could also be, you could be lobbying a campaign ally as well. So someone you want to get on board with your campaign, who you think will be useful in building your campaign and building the power of your campaign, so then you can influence the ultimate decision maker or decision makers. And who is it? Well, it could be, some examples, your local MP, local councillors, if it's the council that makes the decision. It could be councillor or principal as well. There's just a few examples. And why to do it? Well, to gain their support for your campaign in the first instance. But if you come out of a meeting and they're not supportive, you still force them to engage with the issue and justify their position and form their arguments for why they are doing what they're doing or not doing what they're doing. And kick off just focusing in on MPs as a potential target of lobbying, and just going to do a bit of background to MPs, who they are and what influence and power they have. So first of all, very basically, what is an MP? A Member of Parliament is someone who is elected to a particular area or constituency in the UK to represent them in the House of Commons. These divide their time between their constituency and the Houses of Parliament. London. Once elected, MP's job to represent all the people in her or his constituency. So it's, if they don't necessarily agree with what you're saying, it's their responsibility to represent you as their constituents and to follow up your views to the ministers or people who have ultimate responsibility for that policy out, or those choices that are being made in government. And whether anyone know any MPs there are in it's very speedy there. 650, that's right, 650 MPs in the UK, although the government currently has plans to reduce that down to 600, I believe, which we'll have in this Parliament, along with the redrawing of the constituency boundaries as well. Here's a quick of what your MP can do. So MPs can ask parliamentary questions, make speeches, they can table amendments to proposed legislation, they can table and sign early day motions, which are sort of parliamentary petition, really. They can request meetings with government ministers, give advice and guidance to constituents. They can letters on behalf, raising of particular issues or subjects with their colleagues. Form for that is groups called all parliamentary groups, which are informal groupings of formal groupings of MPs around specific issues, and organise one of those on students. Use that specialist knowledge or expertise to assist you, and of course, when it comes to vote in Parliament, they all have a vote. Go through the campaign now, and which of the campaign has been so far. Before that, has anyone got any questions around MPs or the parliamentary process, or what MPs can do? Like it. So cool. So so far are focused on the planned scrapping of maintenance grants that plans to do. So yes, government plans to replace university maintenance grants with loans in England from September 2016. Grants are worth £3,387 per year for students whose household income is less than £25,000. This change that debt from a 3-year undergraduate degree will reach £53,000. And there will also, if these changes go through, be likely to be knock-on effects in the donations, as this is a devolved matter to the Scottish Parliament, the Northern Ireland Assembly, and Welsh Assembly. Impact on the formula whereby money is allocated to those different parliaments in those nations. It will reduce the amount that they'll have, and so they'll have some difficulties to make around funding for education through maintenance support. And why do these changes matter? Well, our research found that a third, 35% of students would not have gone to university without the help of a grant. Mean that the poorest students have the most debt, £50,000 from a 3-year course, and we believe that this will deter people from applying, and will influence what they choose to study as well. We don't have proper the impact that these changes will have, and an own equality impact statement noted that the possibility that students from lower income households will be put off by these changes and by the removal of maintenance grants. Also evidence to show that increased participation. So they were removed for a while from about 1999 to 2004, and when they were reintroduced, it had a positive impact in participation from students from lower income households. So that there is that for every £1,000 worth of grants, it's a 4% increase in participation amongst that group. So it's likely that it will have an impact. Now, lobbying and how lobbying of MPs work with this campaign. So the government's working majority is just 16. So out of the 650 MPs, 329 are Conservative MPs who have a vote. 313 voting MPs from other parties or who are independent. That doesn't add up to 650. The rest are made up of MPs from Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland who do not vote. They do not take up their seats. And there is also a Speaker and 3 deputies. So the Speaker was formerly a Conservative, 2 the deputies are Labour, and the other one is a Conservative. But this will mean that only 8 MPs, only 8 government MPs need to change their minds in order to defeat the government. It's a powerful position from a lobbying point of view. Because the government will be very wary over the next 5 years of bench MPs. Concerned they'll be worried they could potentially lose votes in Parliament. It won't take much for them to. They'll want to tread very carefully, particularly if backbenchers start expressing concern over a particular issue. And this is just to say that the lot of MPs and meeting with MPs is really important, but it's part of a broader strategy. So as well as having meetings with MPs and you're meeting with them and being constructive in those meetings, setting out what you want, you need to be prepared to make the point publicly when we disagree with them, and do so in a way which make our point, but that and listen to us in the future. It's very important for us to not being afraid of being able to call out decisions wherever they are if they do not agree with us, because it's important to be effective in that inside point of view. Insider, it's sometimes referred to as having those meetings and having those good constructive relationships with what decision maker it is, whether it's an MP or the Vice Chancellor or Principal, etc. Or whether it's having those constructive relationships, but also not being to call them out. And key to achieving success on a campaign like the campaign against the cutting of grants is continuing to win arguments, to having strong arguments, and knowing where for example, case where the government is on the issue, what their arguments are for cutting grants, and how to counter those arguments. What are we asking MPs to do? Asking them to write to the Minister for Universities, Joe Johnson, concerned about the cuts. We'll ask them to pray against the regulations when they are laid. This hasn't happened yet. and the announcement was made in the July budget, but it hasn't properly put down the regulations in Parliament. What happens, we need to ask MPs to pray against them, and that will trigger a debate if enough MPs do that. And we've also been asking MPs to ask parliamentary questions on the cuts, and there have been lots of those happening. What has happened already? But as you probably know, there was a fantastic constituency lobby on grants on 18th of September, on and around the 18th of September. It was a load of these taking place by students' unions across the country, and there's some stats there on the numbers that took place, and the numbers that are still being chased, and in many cases successfully for meetings. And we had all the opposition parties essentially sign up to against cuts to grants, and a number of Conservative MPs also saying that they will raise with ministers, and a few called for a debate. Really reached lots of MPs on that day. It was fantastic. Next was the Westminster lobby, which has just been announced, taking place on Tuesday, the 8th of December. How is this different to what has already happened? Well, the aim here will be to reach MPs that have not been met by asking student officers and students to meet their home MPs. So go and say particularly if their MPs are Conservative MPs, then we reach more of those. Having people come down to Westminster will be to be part of that, because we can brief those students on the day and make those meetings as effective as possible. We're going to broaden out the campaign, so it'll be about grants, of course. It'll also be around a range of issues addressing access in education. For example, the education area reviews, which will mean that there'll be a lot of mergers of colleges, and which will mean further for students to travel into college, so they'll have longer journeys, or more expensive journeys, which will be a barrier for some even continuing their education. There's the freezing of the graduate loan age cap as well. That's key, which we're campaigning to have raised. And there's changes like the freezing of loan repayment threshold, which means that lots of graduates will be paying more for their student loans than they otherwise expected to. Any questions about at this stage before I move on to the having effective lobbying meetings? Again, using an MP as an example here, but a lot of these tips and so on will be applicable to other decision makers as well, and other people that you might want to lobby. In terms of an MP specifically, in terms of securing a meeting, before you meet them, giving them plenty of notice and following up, being persistent once you send out the invitation is really important. They get a lot of correspondence. It helps to bump your ask for up the lane, as it were. It helps to cut through and make sure that you secure that meeting. In terms of before you meet them as well, there's a lot to build a campaign and build the power of your campaign. So building support among students in demonstrable ways, such as like a pin or so on, and taking that along to your meeting to show the strength of feeling around a particular issue. And that could be grants, so it could be whatever you're meeting about. Finding students who would be personally affected by the issue as well. It's a powerful way to message across is through the actual real impact of a change on people. So for grants, that'd be a current student who receives grants going along and saying, without grants, I think I'd have gone to I'd have been too worried about the debt that I'd have had. Or it could find a prospective student who's thinking about going, who would be put off by not having a grant, could also that would be really powerful as well. It's really central to whatever you're campaigning on, to that personal story, as well as the stats to show your support and the research around the issue, show to your arguments. Also getting local allies on board, such as Vice Chancellor and Principal. Again, this is the grants in terms of trying to get them on board to the campaign, because they'll be really influential when going to see your MP. But whatever in other issues, it may be that the other localizations, such as charities or community groups who might work on the issue that you're about, would be a really powerful ally. So before the meeting, it's really important to research the MP and find more about their background. That's all around their personal backgrounds, their education, previous employment, trying to build a picture of them as a person before you meet them. What do they stand for? I mean, their party, the party they belong to, is really important. This will give you what their views might be. Whether they're a backbencher or a minister, that will make a difference as well. Whether they're tied to the batches are less tied party line. Where a minister, they'll be they're tied to the party line. Effectively, they'll have less independence to express their views and support something that their party doesn't support. And if they're rebellious, whether they always vote along what their party says, thinking you're an MP in 2010, did they vote for the rise in tuition fees? Size of majority is really important as well, as the more that is, so that the fewer votes that they won by, basically, the more they will sometimes they're constantly thinking about courting votes and things that are popular. There's some examples of places to look. So sites, Wikipedia is accurate, but generally pretty good, I think, as long as it's referenced. They Work For You is a site that has sort of information on MPs, their voting records, and what they've spoken about in Parliament. And a simple search line as well will uncover interviews and articles about the MPs. isn't along students who are personally affected by the issue. As we mentioned before, all personal stories and case studies are really important, and give those students the training confidence to meet their MP, because it can be daunting, a daunting experience, but it's really worthwhile when that comes off, when they like what they've done and they feel like they've been into. Be clear about your asks. MP do help. What are you going in there looking to get out of? What will you be happy with? Just in terms of grants, what the asks were before, in terms of writing to the minister and asking parliamentary questions and praying against the regulations as it said. But whoever you're meeting, whether MP or another decision maker, being beforehand what you want to get out of the meeting is it's really important. In the arguments back to front as well, the research that you do beforehand will give you a good idea of what arguments you think might sway a particular MP or decision maker. And being able to run through it as well and rehearse it will give people the confidence to as they get into the meeting, whoever's doing the meeting, it will help them to feel in having those arguments with MP. And during the meeting as well, try and work out whilst you're talking to an MP, what their answers are, and if potentially swayed to your point of view, try and really look into what dedication is for agreeing with a cut to grants. Work out if they've done their own thinking on the issue, or whether they're just sort of towing the party line and reading out what they've been told. After the meeting, it's really important to follow up on the meeting, send a thank you to the MP. Part of this is about good relationship building. They might view on one particular issue, but they might agree with you in the future as well on other issues, or you may want to meet with them in future. So build that good relationship is really important, and sending any further information that they ask for and doing that promptly. If they were supportive and were very much wanting to help, think of anything else that they can do to help organise the issue. If they were supportive, did you get a sense of what arguments might convince them? Is there anything that you could go back with them to this that might get them to change their minds? It's worth thinking about what pressure you can build. So in terms of if you've got a large number of students who have signed up to this campaign, who are very supportive, as I said before, to not being afraid to publicly call them out and say that the MP isn't supportive. And it's important to balance this and do it in a way that is forceful and makes the point that your points as to why you think that on this issue. And if you do that in that way, then they won't. Wrong of them to get annoyed to and be able to maintain that relationship of being able to go into those meetings, those good meetings, but also being able to straight outside as well, if it's the right way and with the right tone. Great. That's the end of that. So thank you very much for coming. If you have any further questions, please type them in. It would be useful to know what whether you found useful, else would have been useful to cover more of. If it isn't useful, please feel free to drop me and email me about it. In the next steps on cuts, on cut costs, there will be a campaign pack available next week, and you'll receive a bunch of resources to help mobilise for the lobby in December, in the week after next. So yeah, I hope that's useful, and thank you all very much for coming. And yeah, any questions, please follow and let me know.